Namaste. Welcome to the Hindu Parenting Podcast. Every parent has experienced that moment when a child asks a simple question that opens the door to something much deeper. Why do we wear a bindi? What do our traditions mean? Why do we do yoga? Questions like these often lead us to think of the big picture. How do we help our children feel confident in their identity as they grow up in an increasingly global world? Today's conversation is inspired by Namaste Yoga, a powerful and thought-provoking short film directed by Ravi Chand of Warrior Tribe Films. Set in Australia, the film follows young twins Shiv and Kali and their father Gopal as they navigate grief, family, tradition, and questions of cultural belonging. Through beautiful storytelling and visuals, Namaste Yoga explores how children understand their heritage, how parents pass on wisdom, and what happens when ancient traditions are misunderstood, commodified, or disconnected from their roots. More importantly for us, Namaste Yoga is also a parenting story. It reminds us of the importance of answering our children's questions with patience and confidence. It shows how everyday rituals, family stories, and inherited knowledge can become anchors for the next generation. Today, we are delighted to be joined by the film's director, Ravi Chand. We'll discuss the inspiration behind Namaste Yoga, the challenges faced by Hindu families, storytelling, identity, and what parents can learn from the thoughtful relationship between Gopal and his children. Raviji, welcome to the Hindu Parenting Podcast. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Namaste, thank you. Nice to be here.
I'd like to start with a few thoughts on the film. Though it is set in Australia, Namaste Yoga is relevant for Hindu families worldwide. And I'm just amazed at how many themes you have packed into just 22 minutes of the film. What inspired you to tell this particular story? Because I know there are many themes like, of course, yoga, and then there is the grief of losing one's mother. There is the question of identity. There is parenting. There is belonging. There's so many things coming together. So where did you start? What inspired you?
I started from the point of view that I wanted to tell a story that was uniquely Hindu as well. And from my lived experience, as well as that's where stories usually tend to come from, the most truthful stories. And so there's so many parts of the film that mirror what's actually happened in my life. So one of the things is the mother has passed away. My mother passed away in a car accident a week from my 12th birthday. So it's dealing with that trauma of, Shiv and Kali are around a little bit younger than what I was at that age, but it just put into perspective, like just those little bodies and how much that little body, the amount of trauma that it was going through at the time that I didn't realize until, now that I'm an adult. And it was part of a talent initiative. So the screen agency body here called Screen Australia, and then there's a national broadcaster called ABC, and they put out a call around the country for ideas for short films for their broadcast channel. It had to be specifically aimed at children. And so I wanted to tell my experience of, I remember once when I was younger and at this time, living from the Hindu diaspora, particularly in a Western country, you know that there's a version of you that's at home, and there's a version of you that's outside that you put on to survive through all the racism and Hinduphobia and a lot of things that you have to deal with on a daily basis. And so I remember once I was in school and there was a yoga class, and I remember just feeling really icky about it. And it was just the way the class was conducted and the way that I was used in almost like exotified and it wasn't like I was picked on, but it was more like I could feel something just wasn't right. And I almost felt like there's this knowledge that was given back to me that I felt like I should have known at least a little bit something about. And so I just visited that point as well. And another real aspect of what I wanted to talk about with Namaste Yoga is just the sheer strength in kindness, and how our fatherly figures can actually show kindness, and that becomes a real strength for our children as well. So you see that through the film.
It's interesting that you chose child characters to be the main protagonists here, because we don't often understand what our children are going through, especially growing up in a different culture, the diaspora experience. Though the film is set in Australia, many people can relate to that all over, of course, the diaspora, and some parts of it, I think, apply to India as well today. What's even more interesting in the way you chose to handle it is the story of the father. The father raising two children after losing his wife. Gopal, the father, appears as the keeper of tradition and an anchor for his family. What stood out to me is that we don't often see fathers portrayed as cultural transmitters in family stories. So, was this a deliberate choice, and what conversations do you hope that this inspires fathers in particular to have with their children?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The way that Gopal deals with Shiv is exactly the way that I talk to I got a 9-year-old boy, and it's exactly the same way that I talk to him as well. It's just being able to provide them with the space to be able to ask questions and feel like no question that they ask is a wrong question, and to help guide them through that, and in the most easiest to understand for them. And that's the hard part, breaking down such grand concepts into such a simple form for them to understand. And I guess being a scriptwriter and being able to think about that a number of times, that allowed me to create an example of how it should happen, particularly after death. Like, I remember when my mother passed away, it was an awful time, and it remained that way for a very long time. And I still can even just think about certain moments, and it takes me exactly back to that day. And so the loss of losing a parent, unless you've been through it, it's such an overwhelming feeling, particularly as a child, because you think about your head spins at trying to figure out, my mother is never going to come back. Like, I used to have dreams that my mum would come back, and I'd run to the door, and then I'd wake up, I'd run to the door, and then I realized it was a dream, because and the sense of disappointment that would have as well. So it's really taking a lived experience from what I have felt, and that conversation of how I would have loved for that to happen for me growing up, and also for others as well. So showing that for fathers in particular, we don't need to dominate children. We don't need them to be scared of us, because for me, growing up in a really strict household, if you're overly strict with your kids, they just learn another way to do things that they shouldn't be doing, or they get better at hiding things from you, or they just don't open up to you. And that's certainly something that you don't want, particularly those of us that face a lot of issues in the diaspora around racism and bullying and Hinduphobia as well. Like, you want your children to be able to feel like they can come to you and talk to you and ask you any questions, and not feel like they're going to be judged. So I felt like that was a moment where Gopal could be that person. And you see his change from the beginning. He really is caught in his depression, he's caught in his loss, but he's also got to be a father as well. Life doesn't stop, and you don't stop being a father because you're going through things. You certainly have to deal with things in your own way. And, if it was a longer film, we certainly would show that, but it was a short film, so we didn't get the chance. And the lead characters were the two kids as well, so we focus everything on the kids. But yeah, it was certainly something that I particularly wanted to have, was just to show that, the as I was saying before, the amount of strength that comes from kindness, the amount of strength that comes from being gentle to our kids. And I've had this conversation before where they're like, well, but, you need to toughen your kids up for the world so they can deal with the world. Yeah, but the world will do that anyway. The world will toughen them up anyway. They'll have to deal with it. They need a place to come to know where they're safe. And so that's what I wanted to create through showing through Namaste Yoga as well.
I think you've done a fantastic job of showing how parents can relate to their children, explaining things like Paramatma, Atma, Shakti, and deeper meanings of Hinduism, including yoga, the purpose of yoga, why do we do yoga, all these things. I think you did a great job. And you were the one who acted as Gopal too. So was that an experience that was different for you? Are you used to acting?
Well, yeah. So I've been an actor for longer than I've been a director and a producer. I started out as an actor, and one of the things a casting agent said to me, which really resonated with me, was that you can be the best actor in the world, but if no one writes a character for you to be on screen, then there's no role that I have for you. So that really made me frustrated, because a lot of the this is before diversity was even something within the screen industry. And a lot of the roles that came through were very stereotypical, and they always had to put on an accent. I remember receiving an audition once for a commercial that literally used Apu from The Simpsons as their character to base a real life character off. And so I got really frustrated. And so I thought, I'm not going to wait for these roles to come. I'm going to create these roles. And so I started writing. And then from there, I realized the power of being able to communicate these things through film, and particularly when I saw that a lot of the stories that resonated for me and that were truthful for me, particularly for someone that has a lived experience of being Hindu. You see a lot of films and a lot of people can relate to this. You see TV shows, films, they talk about being Hindu, and then you just look at it and you know that that's a person performing, or it's a show for someone performing to be Hindu, not actually has lived as a Hindu. And so it gets really frustrating. And so being a filmmaker, being a producer, writer, director, it allows me to create these characters, these stories that resonate, and I collaborate in great detail with the community as well. And so the idea of putting myself in as an actor, I didn't really think about that until, I wrote it, and then we got to the point where we were casting. And one of the things that I really wanted to show is a consistency of a particular type of character or a particular type of actor that is consistent through their work. So I wanted to show to our younger generations and to our current generations, even like elders as well, that, we don't have to always be the stereotypical villain, or we don't, if we are the villain, then there's something about us that is like an anti-hero, or we're not always the one that, is being trodden on all the time, or the weak one in the corner, or the computer geek, or the doctor, or whatever. It's like all these stereotypes. I wanted to create really strong characters because that's who our ancestors were. Those are the stories that we came from. And those stories have been told for thousands of years orally and through text as well. And so I wanted to show that, because it's very hard and I know this from a lived experience, very hard to become something if you don't see it. And so it's providing the opportunity for our community to be able to see that. And so that's where the acting came into that, and I made the choice to do that. And it was very difficult. Like, you're directing, you've got a wonderful crew that's around you that supports you, but it also there's a lot of moving parts and a lot to get through in a day. And even as a director, you've got so many things to think of, and then you've got to switch your brain off and then go to another side of your brain to become the actor, and then switch back again to be able to look at your performance and go back and forth between that. So it was an exhausting process, and it always in preparation is an exhausting process as well. But it's kind of, I feel like it's my dharma, my karma to do that for our community. So that's why I do it. I don't necessarily have to, I could get someone else to do it, and I certainly will for other projects that we have coming up. But for very specific ones where I'm like, no, I really need to have this grounded from a lived experience because the character is so specific, then that's when I will jump into that role. And I do acting outside of my own show.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I imagine it would have taken a lot of introspection, a lot of thought to be able to come up with a neat way to explain to children what these big concepts are: the Atma, Paramatma, Shakti, what's the purpose of yoga, things like that. And there are many Hindu parents who have probably not put that much thought into it. And do you have anything to say to them? Where do you start? Being the kind of father that Gopal portrayed, how do you do that?
I was lucky enough that I put out a pitch video for a documentary on Facebook, and it went around the world. And it was about how I found out my maternal grandma, after my mother passed away, we lost all contact with my other side of the family. So I found out after 24 years that she was still alive. And so I went and met her for the first time in 24 years. And so that was a documentary that's, a pitch that was put up on Facebook. And from that, I had elders in the community from around the world that watched that and got in contact with me and helped me to really look deep into the decolonization of our Indigenous knowledge and what that meant, and looking deep into that. And so there were a number of people that helped me. In particular, there were two people. One was Zana Joshi, and another one was Indu Vishwanathan. And Indu is an academic, Zana Joshi is an activist, and Zana has like this huge catalogue of podcasts that I listened to throughout all of COVID, and I just absorbed all of that. And then Indu, I spoke to her so many times, and always reading up on her work as well. And she's so smart in the way that she puts really complicated things forward. And Zana Joshi has also got an ability to, she was actually working with me. She was the cultural collaborator on this as well. So every part of the script, everything that I wrote down, she would check over and go, no, this is not right, or this would be better this way because this is the true essence of being Hindu. Or, even sending her the plans of what the puja room look like, and she would be like, okay, this is where this is the best place to put Shuji's picture, or this is the best place to put Vishnu's picture, and all those different sort of things. It was thought to every single detail. So for me, all those people were around me and helping me. And I also had yoga acharyas, I had Bharatanatyam acharyas as well that were helping me. There's a team of them. There was 4 different people that were helping me with Bharatanatyam, and then there was also a yoga acharya as well that did yoga in a traditional Sanskrit way. And so they were a team that I'd always tap into, and I was always collaborating, going back and forth. But then it was my job as the director and the writer to then go, how is this going to relate to people really seeing the emotion of what Gopal and these children are going through? And that's your job as a storyteller. And in order to do that, I had to go really deep into what that moment was like for me at that particular time. And as an actor, that's what you do. You recall a lot of those things back up. And so it's thinking about how I wish someone talked to me, or how, if the perfect conversation went, what it would look like. It's, when things are said to you, when racist things are said to you, when people make fun of you, like the thing where, in the film, they talk about the bindi being target practice. That was actually something that was said to me. And I wish at the time I had a comeback. And even to this day, I still think I've got 1,000,001 comebacks. But at that particular moment, because you're a child and it's the first time you're hearing it, you're completely in shock. So I was thinking about writing this for our children, that if a similar thing was going to happen to them, what would they do? What conversations could I trigger with their parents, with other elders, with community, so that they could then seek to them, say, oh, what would you do in this situation? And it opens up more conversations, so they're more prepared for when something like this happens. So a lot of it was introspective, but it's also filmmaking is also a collaborative process. So the actors brought a lot to it as well. We had very extensive rehearsal processes. and going deep into character. And that's my job as a director, to really make the actor understand their character and what that meant. So for me, it was the difficult part with children is you have a very different directing process than you have with, like, the adult actors as well. So a lot of it is around with the kids, making them aware of what these concepts are and having those conversations before we even get into the script. So yeah, there's a lot of introspect, but there's also a lot of collaboration as well.
And I love the way you brought in the Guru Shishya Parampara in many ways, the lineage and the ancestry, the way Gopal says that he learned yoga from his father, and his father learned from his father, the grandfather in turn. And you did the same thing for Bharatanatyam, where the mother of the kids learned it from her mother, and so on. I think you brought that in as well. So it was a nice fusion of different concepts that we as Hindus need to know. We're not having all these conversations with our children to the extent that we should. But I think this is a great beginning. And another theme that you raise so effectively is cultural appropriation and the impact on a child's sense of self-worth. Cultural appropriation, again, is something we're not really comfortable yet, I think, talking to children about it. But especially in India, we need to have a lot more discussion on those areas. And what do you think we can do to talk about these things more openly, and especially with children? Because what I find is parents don't want to scare their kids or talk about anything negative. But you touched on all these themes in a very realistic way, but also in a very positive way. And do you have anything to say to parents about how that can be done? How do you maintain this positive spirit and a can-do attitude rather than become defeatist in the face of challenges?
I can completely understand. Like, being a parent is really hard. You work, you look after the house. You've only got finite hours in a day, and children can have a million and one questions. Some of them completely about nothing. A lot of the times they just want attention. And I get it. It is a very difficult job. But one of the things, I guess, as part of our karma, our dharma as parents, is to make sure that our children are prepared. And if we aren't doing it, they will either seek it out somewhere else or someone else will tell them. And if somebody else is telling them, you don't know what that conversation is. And so it's best that I would rather have my child know what's being said is wrong in some way, and just know and be able to at least say, I'm not even talking about this conversation because what you're saying is nonsense, as opposed to being manipulated in a manner that can be really harmful, because it's these little seeds that get planted along over a long period of time. And not only that, it's our Indigenous knowledge which actually gets erased as well. Like, how much of the world thinks yoga is about fitness? How much of the world thinks yoga is about having an Instagram profile and what sort of asana you can do? How many of them don't even allow a mantra to be said in their yoga studios, but they will quite happily put incense and all the aesthetics around to make it look like it's more exotic. Those sort of things, after a while, like, we've seen it over in just a few generations, how those things can get lost very easily. And so I think if we just start to begin to have the conversation, we don't need them to completely understand. They're children. They'll grow to understand. They'll grow to become an adult and understand. But if we plant if you take care, I guess the best way of thinking about it is, if you've got we've all heard of that, the story about the tree. Like, if you've got a bent tree and then you're trying to straighten it, it's almost difficult to do that. You want to nurture that tree when it's growing to make sure that it's straight. And so with my son, I will talk to him all the time about things that could be racist. If something comes up, or if something's Hindu-phobic, he'll turn around to me he doesn't completely understand what things are. He just knows that if things are done in a manner that's offensive, he thinks it could be racist. I went, no, that's not racist, but it's Hinduphobic. Or yes, it's Hinduphobic and it's racist. Or no, that's erasing this, or it's this way. And we keep having those conversations. This knowledge doesn't happen in one sitting. Mm-hmm. It happens over many sittings. And as parents, we have to have the ability to, at least the most important thing we can give our children is time. And they can be, straight A plus students, but if we don't give them any time, they're going to be very empty children. So I think this is the importance of why we wanted to, do such a film that was so specific that would open up conversations within families as well. And it's about having the time to have those conversations and hopefully creating work like this. The aim of like Namaste Yoga, the aim of it is so that parents can watch it with their children, and at the end of it, they can discuss it. And one of the easiest things to do is just turn around and say, has anything ever happened like that to you? What do you think about what she went through? Or what do you think about what Carly went through? Or what do you think about how the father approached how he's talking to Shiv? Have those conversations, because through those conversations, you'll probably find out a little bit more about your children. And that's all you've got to do. Just allow them to talk, and don't talk to your children wanting to reply to them, to correct them, to bring them back to thinking a certain particular way. Allow them to express what they're feeling, hear them first, and ask them why they think that way, and then go into your conversation. It's a very different conversation. That's the way that we wanted to have it, with how we're showing that it would happen with Gopal and with Shiv as well.
You've brought up some very important points, like giving children time and listening to them. I think we get so caught up in everyday living that we sort of forget to give them the time that they need. These conversations cannot happen by just sitting a child down in front of you and saying, let's talk. It happens over a period of time when you do things with them, when you give them the time and you start listening to their everyday stories that they tell you. The other important part about the movie is the attention to space. I see imagery everywhere, the puja space, the Bharatanatyam, the flowers, the murtis, yoga, and then these little details like using your index finger to apply the bindi and the tilak. So what was your thought process behind not just the attention to detail, but to the beautiful use of space and lighting? It created a very serene and positive atmosphere, even though a lot of the story deals with the grief of losing the mother for the children. There is still some acceptance, and I think a lot of it has to do with the way you handled space. So what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so that was very much on purpose. So one of the pitch things about the overall look of the film and the way that the film was going to be constructed is that I wanted to have it like to Astama from darkness to light. So if you see at the beginning, there's a lot of blues, there's a lot of greens, there's a darker sort of mood. I mean, you have some warmth in there, but it's more nostalgic to the way that it used to be. But the majority of things at the beginning, you feel like it's a lot colder. But as the story starts to unfold and Gopal starts to unfold as a father, and you see the children learning more and coming back into their roots, you see more colour starting to come in. And by the end of it, you see a lot of colour coming through. And there's a particular scene which explodes with energy and with colour. And that's very much on purpose, because it's about... I was having this discussion with the broadcaster and everybody that was involved with the film, not just those that were from the community, but those that were crew that were that were white and had no idea about all these concepts. And the discussion was about an education, because the film for me, it isn't just about people learning because of what's happened and the end result of the film. It's also about in the making of it, what people take away from that. And so in those conversations, I was saying to them, yoga is about union. When the children are performing, they're in union not only with each other, they're in union with their mother, they're in union with Shakti, they're in union with Paramatma, they're in union. That's what yoga is. Yoga isn't just about doing these asanas. It is part of it, but it's a very small part. There's a number of other aspects of yoga that yoga is about how you live your everyday life. And so all those moments is Gopal coming back into the way that he lives his everyday life and his dharma for his children. All those aspects were discussed, and that's how you see that building towards the film as it kind of moves forward. The using the index figure is a really makes me smile all the time when because I did not even consider that. This is coming from a lived experience of being Hindu. You just do that. It's just one of those things that you put your finger in there, and I did it without any thought because that's how it's always done. And so then when people are saying, we're saying, you did it in the index finger, you did in the right finger. I was just doing what I normally do. So that's the beauty of, the importance of it being from a lived experience, those tiny little details. And I knew that when this film came out from after we did it in the edit, I knew those details were the things that our community would see. The wider sort of general population would go, this is a beautiful film, it's emotionally resonant, and a lot of people do get quite emotional, towards the end of the film. But one of the things that I knew, and I was making it for our community because there were so many things in there that only our community would know. And they would see it, and I just know that sense of peace and of calm and of shanti that you feel when you see that done properly. And so the film itself becomes something else for our community. And that was the whole reason why we did it that way.
You've left many clues throughout the movie that Hindus can actually pick up on and find a way to talk to their kids about all these things. Tell us a little bit about your future plans, if you're planning to do anything in this space, kind of similar to what you did with the yoga movie, or do you plan to do longer movies? What are your plans for the future?
Well, last year I finished my master's in film and TV, and my graduating film, I'm now writing that as a feature film now. All my films will always have always be grounded in the characters having some sort of Hindu aspect to their lives, and that will vary depending upon the actual story. So there's a feature film, there's a TV series that I've in early development that I've written as well, which is very much based in Hindu concepts, and really looking in deep detail into that as a story, but based in the modern world and around time travel. And then I've also got a number of web series that I'm creating, and we're writing now at the moment that's looking at dismantling a lot of racist and Hinduphobic stereotypes that actually exist online, and so that our community, not just about being Hindu, but also just about the color of our skin, and also being Indian and Sri Lankan as well, like having a language to actually stand up to that, or having a language to be able to rise above the noise of that. And so I'm creating, they're 6 times 10 minutes, so 6 episodes by 10 minutes each, and there are a number of them I'm co-creating with a number of different people. So hopefully they'll be out soon, but they do take a long time to actually make as well. And I do have another feature film and a documentary as well. So there's a number of things that are in the pipeline. And I guess for us, one of the biggest things of why this takes a little bit longer than it normally does is because I'm very adamant about the ownership of these stories remaining with us, so that we can pass these stories on to our children, or they're not re-edited, or they're redone or revamped in such a way that's harmful, and or repurposed in a way that's harmful. By owning the intellectual property, we can create those stories, we can create a pathway for our children to come through if they want to do this and carry this on as well, if they want to tell stories. Right now, it's very difficult to come through the industry, and it's very difficult to, own your own stories. But that's why we're doing it in this sort of manner as well, so that, I'll be here and gone in one lifetime, but if we can create something for future generations that they can pick up and they can continue to tell these stories and these influence entire generations, so at least the truth is documented and they have something to go to, then that's our karma and dharma being done.
Absolutely. That's the crux of karma yoga. Owning your own stories. Now that's very important because that's not something we see today among people with a Hindu experience. We hardly own any of our stories, and it's usually told by an outsider. Have you heard from parents and children, or anybody who's watched Namaste Yoga, whether Hindu or outside the fold? What has the response been like?
We've had an incredible response. We didn't plan this, but it was, there's schools here in Australia that have access to the streaming platform ABC here because you can watch it Australia-wide. They were watching it in schools, and children that were facing racism would watch Namaste Yoga and feel better about themselves. They feel better about the color of their skin. It wasn't just about being Hindu as well. It was a number of things that were helping children. And so that was quite remarkable to hear that and have those stories come back to us. Because a number of times, we'd send it off, the film would get to different people, or we'd tell them to watch it. And they're like, oh yeah, my son's told me about this, or my daughter's told me they watched this in school. So that was wonderful. I think one of the best stories that I actually heard was from one of our crews. So as part of Namaste Yoga, we had a child psychologist who was a part of the entire production from start to finish, just so that the children, if there were any concepts that it triggered anything or they were confused about, we had a child psychologist there to help them through with that. And also after the film's released, if they ever got bullied or they had issues, even as they got into teenage years in high school, they've always got this contact of this child psychologist who is Hindu as well, who is also Indian as well, that they can contact, and they can talk that through with them. And then that child psychologist can get in contact with me, and we already have things in process already set to take care of these children if it does get to that, and we all kind of surround them. But one of the things I found interesting is we had the world premiere here in Melbourne and in a cinema. And so she came, the child psychologist came with her mother and watched it, and she was telling me a story about, and she actually posted about it online as well, about on the drive home, she's really quiet in the car, and her mother said to her, anything happened like that to you? And mind you, this child psychologist is in her 20s, and this is the first time she's having this conversation with her mother, and she was like, well, actually, yeah, I those things were said to me as well. And they started having this conversation. She just said it was remarkable that in her 20s, the film gave her an opportunity to open up a discussion with her mother and have the conversation in such a productive way that she felt like she could talk to her mother and be understood in that way, which I thought was quite powerful. And so we're finding that the film does that a lot. It has the ability to start up conversations with children and even grown adults that have gone through this, particularly those that are in a Western diaspora will really understand that. And funnily enough, like I had the incredible chance of speaking at the World Hindu Conference in Thailand a few years ago. And I spoke to a number of people around the world, particularly those from India. And the feedback that I was getting was that the way that yoga and all our traditional practices were thought of, particularly in India, as more like of a backwards and old way, that the new modern Western way is more modern, more technologically advanced. That's everything else is backwards. And that is a trap that everyone from those, Indian diaspora that's living in the West, that's a trap we fell into at a very young age, because you realize the strength of your culture once you become an adult and you want to pass that on to your children. And then you start scrounging around to try and make up for time, and it's very difficult to do that. So hopefully if we have films like this, and hopefully it encourages more films like this. I would love other cultures to talk about their Indigenous culture and how important it is for their children as well. So it's really about connecting to who we were before we are told who we should be, particularly by colonialism. So that's what all of our stories, all the stories that we make at Warrior Tribe Films, that's what they're grounded in.
You've raised some really interesting points about, it's not just about being Hindu. It's about having a particular skin color, and also the connect with indigenous cultures around the world. This is an important part of the indigenous experience that I feel Hindus being the largest indigenous tradition around the world, we should probably reach out to the others and play a much more effective role in helping others to reclaim their indigenous traditions too. So
I had a wonderful opportunity to speak to a chapter that's out in Bharat that connects a lot of Indigenous elders around the world and looks at the similarities and commonalities between the Indigenous cultures, particularly, and how similar they are to Sanatana Dharma as well and to Hindu Dharma. And it's an incredible organization that does that. And I think one of the things that came up in, Namaste Yoga and about cultural appropriation, and I learned this from an Indigenous elder from another culture, I think he was a Maori, and it was just said so eloquently, was that cultural appropriation, it is about, there are people, our ancestors were colonized. They were brutally colonized, murdered. They were killed off and tried to erase this culture from them for generations. And when you look at the horrific things that were done, and I won't go into it because it's a kids' channel, but the horrific things that were done to them, and then of someone that, and we as those that are Hindu are the stewards of yoga, and so of the indigenous knowledge of yoga. So if you are choosing to take on teaching yoga or doing aspects of being Hindu, one of the things that this elder said about any indigenous culture is, how have you earned the trauma of those that have come before you? How have you shown up in order to be able to represent this culture that has suffered so much? What have you done to earn that right to do that? That is a question you should be asking yourself first, because there's people that have died for this to exist, to still exist. And when you water it down, something as ancient and as complex as yoga, into something that is like a version of Zumba, it's really disrespectful. And that's one of the things why I brought up the lineage thing, because now I've heard this conversation about, it's post-lineage, we don't do all those sort of things. That's completely erasing the entire indigeneity of what yoga was about. And it is the language of a true colonizer when you speak like that. So, there are some groups that exist that do that, and they do wonderful work. And I can send you the details, so you can also, if you would like to get in contact with them too, you can speak to them and do those things too. But just that's where our films come from. Because for me, growing up, I knew I was Indian, but I didn't even consider the fact that I could be Indigenous, or I could have an Indigenous culture to India. I knew that I was Hindu, but being Hindu and Indigenous weren't the same thing to me. Or being Hindu and, I know in India there's a specific term. There's a lot of things around because of colonization of indigeneity and that identity and what that represents as well. I know that conversation exists, but it's also a lot of Indigenous cultures and people from those Indigenous cultures will be in the same scenario as us, looking at their own Indigenous culture and living in a modern day life, doing all the modern day things, but still anchored in their Indigenous culture. And they call themselves Indigenous, and no one blinks an eye. It's only when we talk about things being Indigenous, people look at us strange. So it's because of the term, I guess Indu Vishwanathan talks about this in great detail, about how racist it is to think that indigeneity is primitive. that in itself is coming in with a colonial mindset, because Indigenous cultures are very sophisticated in the way that they do things.
I have so much respect for people like you and Sean Binder. We had him on the podcast a long time ago because many of you have not even been to India. I don't know about you, but Sean says he has not been to India. And yet you have this connection and you have this fire in you to keep Sanatana Dharma alive. And I think there's a lot that many of us in India could look up to you and learn from your experience. So that's fantastic. Thank you for what you're doing. And go ahead.
I was going to say that this connection to India, this connection to Sanatana Dharma is something that we can't take credit for. It's literally as we know, it's our Isht flowing through us, doing whatever work needs to be done. And so that's what you see in that connection. It is literally our Isht doing their work through us. So for me, this work is coming from my Isht, and it's going to the community, and it doesn't belong to me. So it is wonderful to know that there's that connection to India. And yeah, I haven't been to India, and I'm looking so forward to going to India. I definitely want to bring my son there and connect to exactly where my ancestors are from. Will be an incredible moment for my family lineage as well, and so that I can pass that down to my future generations. But I think all of what you see is Lila working through us and doing what needs to be done, because it's just, sometimes I feel like when you watch these things and it really resonates, like it gives you that moment of that connection back to who you are. And so that doesn't come from me, that comes from much greater place.
Can you tell our viewers how to watch this beautiful movie, Namaste Yoga? Where can they watch this? And is it available on YouTube? Can they watch it anywhere from the world? What about people in India? How do we get to see this movie?
So this is the brilliance that comes in with owning your own stories. So because we own Namaste Yoga, it gets licensed to a broadcaster for 3 years. And once that license is up, it comes back and there's no restrictions. So originally when Namaste Yoga was released, which is fair enough because it's the broadcaster that puts in a lot of money to actually have it made. And so they had exclusive rights for Australia, which meant that we could show it around the world, but we couldn't put it on YouTube because on YouTube you can't geo-block, to Australia. Now that the lease is expired and the ownership comes back to us, we're free to upload it for our community for free. And so that's what we're doing. We're putting it on YouTube and we're putting it up. We're putting it in, we'll put it in episodes so that just because of the way that YouTube works with this algorithm, it's best to do it in that sort of manner as well. We'll still have a version that's available through our streaming platform where you can watch it from start to finish with no ads. I'm not too sure what YouTube's going to do when we post it up there. I think it might put ads. It might automatically put ads at the start and the end. But that's why we've made it in episodes, so you're not watching halfway through it and then hopefully you don't have like an ad that comes through the middle of it. And so yes, it will be available for free on our YouTube channel. You can search for Warrior Tribe Films, or even if you want to go to the website, you can just go warriortribefilms.com /Namaste-Yoga, and you can register on there. You can put your email in there and then we'll send you the link as soon as it becomes available. We will release it on International Yoga Day, and we'll release it in Australia. So Australia, 21st of June comes here first in Australia, then it goes to the rest of the world. So we'll upload it here on that day, and it'll be made available free. And we've had wonderful support from Hindu organizations across the world, and we're very grateful for that as well.
Wonderful. I'm sure all our listeners are just waiting to see the movie. I liked what you said about documenting our heritage for the next generation, because I think we're losing things rapidly. We're losing at a very fast pace. The connection to our ancestors, the indigenous knowledge traditions, there's a lot that we need to still document. And I think efforts like yours and mine come somewhere into the picture. We all have a common goal of documenting, and all that we are doing is for the next generation. Finally, what is your message for young Hindus today, whether they are in India or anywhere outside?
At the moment now, like being Hindu, being Indian around the world is particularly online, can feel quite overwhelming. Like there's just an onslaught of noise. And it seems like that it's never ending and that you have no place here. But this is Kali Yuga as well. So we create these stories so that you can find a little space somewhere to know that you do belong, you do have space, you are important, you are being seen. And if you feel like, you know, the older people in your lives aren't listening to you, tell them you need them to listen. Watch Namaste Yoga, get them to watch Namaste Yoga if it helps. You know, there's a number of good Hindu organizations, including this one, around the world that you can get in contact with to get that support. I feel like there's so many different organizations around the world that are Hindu organizations around the world doing such great work, and we all do it because we want our children to feel like they have a place in this world. And the world is set up so it makes you feel like you don't have a place, but your connection to your community, the connection to your culture, the connection to your Hindu dharma is what is going to help you to rise above that noise. And that's what it is. It's noise. We have to be careful because sometimes that noise can become physical, and I know that firsthand. And so one of the things that I recommend adults, parents and children to do as well is, one of the things that I do with my son is just try and put them in some sort of self-defense course. It's really important for our children to know self-defense. It gives them not just to go throw themselves around in a fight, but it also helps them to give them confidence in themselves to be able to protect themselves, to be able to at least speak or know when to look out for problems that arise. It's really important. There's a big rise of Kalari Payatu as well. It's a great way to get involved in self-defense, but there are a number of other good ones as well. I just think that that's really important for our children, because I see it so many times that our children will get bullied because they're seen as easy targets. And I know that firsthand. And so I would say to kids as well to always keep that conversation open with your parents, because the last thing that they would want to see is for you to be bullied or feeling awful about yourself. And always reach out to a Hindu organization as well to help you with that conversation as well, if you feel like that's not helping, you're not getting it from your parents. But you come from a culture that has such incredible strength, incredible resilience, incredible knowledge, incredible wisdom. And we are very lucky to have been born that we are part of this lineage, to be able to understand this and know this firsthand. So I would say keep solace in that, understand that, keep that close to your heart. It's not saying that we're better than anybody. It's just saying that we're very privileged to be born into this magnificent culture. And when you peel it back and the deeper you look into it, you realize how powerful it truly is and transcends beyond being materialistic as well. And I hope we can continue to remind you of that through the work that we do.
One of the important takeaways of this episode is the respect for Indigenous traditions around the world that we Hindus need to support as well. We need to support them as well. And the respect for Indigenous traditions should include respect for our own tradition, which has a long and illustrious history.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think like particularly for those of us that are living in abroad from Bharat, I think there's a responsibility that comes to also stand in kinship with other Indigenous cultures. They are the custodians of the traditional lands. They know those lands. They are part of those lands. And we need to respect the fact that we should stand in support with them. Bhumimata to them is just a different name. And I think that when you look into the care that Indigenous cultures have around the world for Mother Earth, for cosmos, for ancestors, there's so many commonalities with our Hindu Dharma, being an Indigenous knowledge as well. I think that's really important. Like, it's not just about us and only our own Indigenous cultures. It's about Indigenous cultures around the world, because colonialism had that one impact upon us all as a copy and paste across all of our Indigenous cultures.
Ravi Chand ji, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your valuable insights into yoga, culture, identity, and parenting.
Namaskaram. Thank you very much for having me. I hope I get to speak or meet to some of you someday. If I don't, I really hope Namaste Yoga provides some peace in your heart. Namaskaram.
Thank you. To Hindu parents listening today, our children are the inheritors of wonderful knowledge systems like yoga. Hindus across the ages have made huge sacrifices to keep these systems and traditions alive, yet very few of us are telling our children about their illustrious ancestry. Films like Namaste Yoga help us start those conversations at home. Let's remember that every question and every conversation can be a new opportunity to connect with our Hindu heritage. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Hindu Parenting Podcast and newsletter on Substack. Share it with other parents and leave us a review. And if you haven't yet watched Namaste Yoga, we encourage you to watch it as a family and use it as a starting point for conversations that matter. Thank you for listening.